offers us good news. This song offers us good news about living well when we're lonely, desolate, isolated, when we think we're going to be a burden in someone else's life. This song says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. It also says, He leads me beside the still waters. King David, the psalmist, is telling us that God is the peacemaker. Yes, He is. What our shepherd is saying here is, I will give you peace. He's not saying this to King David, not to Moses, not to Joshua, but I, the shepherd, your shepherd, I will give you peace. I will give you peace when you lie down, when you hit the pause button and lie down in the green grasses of the hills. Yes, I am your shepherd, and I will give you peace. Peace beside the lovely, quiet, still waters of the stream. In other words, you can live well with me. You can lay your burden of anxiety down. You can lay your burden of fear down. You can lay your burden of stress down. You can lay your worries on the curb. You can lay your struggles down. You can lay any kind of difficulty you are going through, any kind. You can just lay it right down there. And you can choose rest instead. To rest beside the still waters, to rest in the beautiful green grasses of the hills, not just any old hills, but the special hills that I have chosen for you. So the shepherd is teaching us that you can choose weariness, or you can choose to wonder, okay? You can choose loneliness, or you can choose to lay in friendship and kinship with me. You can choose anxiety, or you can choose amazement. The choice is yours. The shepherd goes on to teach us about living well in the midst of adversity. Maybe your baby is sick. Maybe you can't make this month's car payment. Maybe the doctor just told you you have a spot on one of your organs and to come back in 3 months so she can take another look at it. And so now you'll be worrying about that spot for the next 3 months. Maybe you haven't been on speaking terms with your mom for 10 years and you want to break the silence, but you don't know what to say after all this time. You just don't know how to break the silence. And deep down, what you're really thinking is, you know what, I shouldn't have to be the one that breaks the silence anyway. After all, it was her fault to begin with. Your shepherd shows you how to live well, even so. The song says, He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. The song says what? It says, He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. John Wesley says this part of the song is all about the shepherd bringing us back from our errors, from our errors and wandering of thinking and resigning ourselves to loneliness or fear or what have you. And the shepherd does this for the glory of His faithfulness, His goodness, His just ways. Many years ago, I asked the person who led the deaf ministry at my church if she would teach me American Sign Language. And she said, of course. Now, I'm a worshiper. I sing in the choir at my church. And I asked her if she would teach me the sign language of some of the songs we sang. So that's where we began. And along the way, I learned many, many things from this wonderful teacher, this wonderful woman of God. And one of the things I learned is that righteousness is signed in the same way as the word holy. So when I think about the shepherd helping me to walk on the right paths, to walk on the paths of righteousness, I also know that when I live well, I am also walking on the path of holiness. The next part of the song says, "Yea, though I walk through the darkest valley." We call this the valley of death sometimes. "Yea, though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." That's why it's important not only to know who you are, but whose you are. For you are with me. How do I know it's you? How do I know? I know because you are my shepherd. I know because your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Did you know there is only one kind of work that requires both a rod and a staff? Only one kind of work. And only one kind of worker requires both a rod and staff to do their work. And that's the work of herding sheep, the work of a sheep herder, the work of a shepherd, the work of our shepherd. There's a lovely book called Psalm 23 by Philip Keller. I've had it for years, but I read it only recently. I read it through in one sitting, so it's a fairly quick read, and yet it is powerfully dense. It's so rich. The author is a pastor who used to be a shepherd, who used to herd and care for his sheep in East Africa. So he knows firsthand what King David knew when he was a shepherd boy caring for his sheep. The author knows firsthand what our Holy Shepherd knows about caring for, protecting, and providing guidance for us, his sheep, so we can live well and want for nothing and flourish. So the rod and staff are both used by our shepherd to provide guidance and also direction to his flock, to us, right? When I was researching for this podcast, I found so much information about how the shepherd uses the rod and staff. And before use comes the actual making of the rod. I mean, great care is taken to select the right wood for the rod. Great care is taken to carve it so that it fits perfectly, just perfectly, into the shepherd's hand, so that that rod actually becomes an extension of the shepherd's right arm. The rod is used for so many things to ensure that the sheep live well. To ward off dangerous prey, sometimes the rod is hurled into the air and thrown into the bushes to alert a wayward sheep to come back into the fold. And sometimes the shepherd uses the rod as an extension of his hands to part the fleece, the wool of the sheep, in order to inspect his sheep for pests or cleanliness as a way to ensure that the sheep are sound in body. Now, the staff is also an instrument to help the shepherd tend his sheep, to help the sheep live well, right? Now, I could do a whole podcast on what the staff is for and how it's used, but I won't right now. In fact, I might do another podcast on Psalm 23 about the staff and leadership and management. All right, for now, just know that it's used primarily to guide and direct the sheep or lambs in their ways. Enter the table and the oil. The song says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over." Here again, the shepherd is providing for us. The great shepherd prepares a feast at his table. He provides us with comforts and joy, and he blesses us by anointing us with the oil of his spirit, that we may drink the cup of salvation, which is always brimful, which is always overflowing. Keller talks about the table that the shepherd prepares. He talks about the table as being in the high hills. They're called mesas in that part of the world. It's a Swahili term. Mesa, the flat part of the hills that the sheep herder prepares for his sheep. Now, he talks about the hard, strenuous labor of love that the shepherd endures in order to provide for his sheep to live well during the dry, hot summer months in the hills of East Africa. He tells about plucking out weeds, the poisonous ones, from the hills so the sheep won't inadvertently eat these poisons and become sickly or deathly ill. Just like the Good Shepherd wants us to live well, he will steer us away from toxins so that we too might live well in the midst of so many temptations and distractions to keep us living in concert with our values and his purpose for our lives. And when we follow the path, when we follow the plan that the Good Shepherd has already laid out for us, our only response must be joy, right? Joy and reveling. And we call this praise. And yes, the song ends with these lovely words: surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. John Maxwell is one of my mentors. What a blessing, right? And I just love how John talks about and writes about Psalm 23. He reminds us that there is a big difference between problems and facts. Well, why is that? He says problems are things we can do something about. Facts are things we can do nothing about. I'm going to repeat that, right? Problems are things we can do something about. We can do something about. Facts, we can't do a thing about. Therefore, we do well not to worry about them, about facts. Now, that's pretty good advice. John goes on to say we apply energy only to those things we can change. We can feel peace and act with poise because we no longer beat our heads against an unbreakable wall. Psalm 23 reminds us of what God alone can control and what we can control. It distinguishes between problems and facts. So, this magnificent song, Psalm 23, ends with these beautiful lines, and I'm going to say not just simply beautiful, but sumptuously beautiful. King David says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Here the great shepherd is saying, don't just settle for living well. Don't just settle for living well. Do not simply say, okay, I'm living well. I'm doing okay. All is good. I'm just going to stay here. Here, the great shepherd is exalting us. He's encouraging us. He's calling us. What's he calling us to do? He's calling us to be astonishing, to live an astonishing life for his name's sake, not for ours, for His name's sake, for His glory, for His kingdom here